Hey, it's Max from UNFTR for the MeidasTouch Network, here with a rather crude update. That's crude in terms of oil, not profanity, although this might veer into the profane because I got some stuff to tell you that I don't think you're going to like, not the least of which is the White House is lying to you. See, the White House would like you to believe that this war, this little excursion to Iran, it's almost over. In fact, it's probably over. It's not even close to over, but we're definitely winning. Even though we're not winning, we just need some people to come to the Strait of Hormuz to help us straighten it out. But the one thing you can take to the bank is that inflation, not a problem. The economy, totally stable, and oil is not going to be an issue. In fact, NEC Director Kevin Hassett told viewers on CNBC that oil prices are going to fall back into the 60s by fall. Mind you, this was just one of a torrent of lies that he told in a single segment, which was an astounding feat. But I want to home in on this oil narrative specifically because he cited the futures markets as evidence that the war is ahead of schedule, saying that tankers are already trickling back through the Strait of Hormuz, that the economy is fundamentally sound. Word of advice for the economic advisors to the White House, or really anyone in Trump's orbit: you're going to have trouble finding work after this term because you can't keep lying and expect everyone not to notice. Anyway, for posterity, let's go through his claims, because this has been a horrific week for economic data. The wheels are coming off at an accelerated pace because of the Iran war, but it's incredibly important that the war story doesn't overshadow the underlying issues that were already plaguing the economy. So let's talk about these issues and drill even further into the oil narratives, pun intended.
The bottom line is that the timeline that President Trump has stated over and over is that it's a 4 to 6 week war, and that we're ahead of schedule. And so already you're seeing tankers are starting to dribble through the straits. And I think it's a sign of how little Iran has left. And so I think we're very optimistic that this is going to be over in the short run. And then there'll be price repercussions when it is over for a few weeks as the ships make it to the refineries and so on. But we've really got a plan for every corner of the disruption, from fertilizer to getting fuel to the West Coast and so on. And we're highly confident that we've got this thing under control and that it'll end soon.
Let's talk that through. When you say end soon, you think a matter of weeks, not months?
Correct. That's right.
And when that happens, where do you expect, let's just say WTI? I mean, we can talk through any of the energy prices, but most of the analysts that we've had on have said that they don't think prices will come back down to the 60s anytime soon. Do you? Is that in your forecast?
Oh, if you look at futures markets, they've got them going down into the 60s again by the fall, and I think that's relatively pessimistic.
75 was what the WTI was for the December contract yesterday.
It goes all the way down to the 50s past the year.
If you look at futures markets, they've got them going down to the 60s again by the fall. Okay. Technically, that's not entirely fabricated, because if you looked at the December 2026 WTI futures, the contract from early March, before escalation was fully priced in, you could have found a number somewhere in that neighborhood on a certain static snapshot. But here's the problem with that framing. Futures curves are not static government forecasts. They are living, breathing, real-time instruments that price in new information every single day. And what he appears to be leaning on, it's my only guess here, is whether it's intentional or not, is the EIA's short-term energy outlook. Now, the EIA's own February forecast had WTI averaging around $53 a barrel for 2026 and $49 a barrel for 2027. These numbers are obsolete. So the March EIA revised it slightly upward, with WTI averaging $74 a barrel in 2026 and $61 a barrel in 2027. But even that revised forecast is already trailing what the live market is predicting. And this is what Hassett didn't tell you. This is the live futures curve on the CME as of March 18th, 2026. The December 2026 contract, the one that he cited, is not in the 60s. It's at $77.7 per barrel as of the morning that he made that forecast. By the end of 2027, the back end of the curve is still sitting in the 70s. Not in the 60s, not in the 50s, nowhere near what was projected before the Hormuz shock fully repriced the market. The entire strip is elevated. There is no month, not one, where WTI is projected to fall back to $60 this year. So the market, their beloved market, has spoken, and it does not agree with the White House. Now layer in what Jeff Curie, who's formerly of Goldman Sachs and now he's at Carlyle, told Bloomberg this week. And when Jeff Curie talks about commodities, by the way, everybody listens because this is one of the most respected oil analysts on the planet.
In the week since we last spoke, has this got worse or better?
Worse. I like to call it molecular contagion. Last week we were talking about shortages in Singapore. Prices of jet fuel spiked to $230 a barrel. This week, it's in Rotterdam. Rotterdam's $220 a barrel. Thailand, Philippines, New Zealand, Australia. So this thing's going intercontinental. And then, so you look at Singapore, Rotterdam, the spread, there's no more price spread. There's no more spare barrels. There's no policy fix. And it's just physics at this point. And I want to emphasize these are physical supply chains. And that the idea of around financialization and the ability to print money doesn't apply here. And I think the title of that piece says it all. You can't print molecules. Product prices are spiraling above $200 a barrel. So the disconnect is between the paper market, which is sitting around 100, and the physical market, which is showing a very different environment.
The paper market has entirely disconnected from the physical market. That is the heart of the story here. So while WTI on paper, the futures contract that Hassett is quoting, is sitting around $100 a barrel, the physical markets are already showing something completely different. Oman crude on the free side of the strait spiked to $173 a barrel. Asia delivered crude, the Dubai-Oman blend that goes into China and Southeast Asia, was trading between 120 and 150. Refined products, jet fuel, diesel, are spiraling above $200 per barrel in Singapore and Rotterdam. So Curie's phrase for what's happening is molecular contagion. The supply shock that started in Singapore has spread to Rotterdam, and now to Thailand, the Philippines, New Zealand, Australia. This thing has gone intercontinental like a virus. And here's his key line where he says, there's no more price spread. There's no more spare barrels. There's no policy fix. It's just physics at this point. So either Kevin Hassett has outdated information or a huge blind spot, or he's lying. And I'll let you determine which one it is. Lying. Hassett's argument at its core is political fantasy. The war ends in 4 to 6 weeks. Tankers start moving again. Iran is defanged and everything normalizes. The market's totally reset. Oil will go back to 60-something. But Curie is making a structural argument, one that transcends any single conflict timeline. He's saying that even if Hormuz opens tomorrow, we've done enough structural damage to physical supply chains that we can't instantly repair them. And here's why. The supply shock from the Hormuz closure is roughly equivalent in magnitude to the demand shock during COVID. Remember what COVID did to global supply chains? It took years, not weeks, years to unwind. And the mechanism matters. This isn't a demand side problem where you could just stimulate your way out of it. This is a physical problem. You've got refinery utilization, tanker routes, storage capacity, product blending. These aren't spreadsheet entries. And there's one more thing that he said that's really interesting. The bigger structural reason that paper prices stayed artificially low so far was Russia. When the sanctions were lifted, Russian crude rallied $65 to $70 per barrel, which closed the spread that previously made WTI and Brent look relatively expensive. But once that gap closed, those spare barrels disappeared from the global system. And now WTI and Brent are starting to catch up where the physical market already is. So those are the economics behind the price movements, but there's one more thing inherent in the story that nobody's talking about. Namely, how we not only put Russian oil back on the map, it's already trading near market rates. And the shock is already so entrenched that Russia will likely be able to pad its oil profits for the balance of the year at a minimum. Now, I'm not defending sanction regimes one way or another because Leveraging the petrodollar is a totally different discussion. But if the goal was to punish Russia for invading Ukraine, the Trump administration has effectively put Russia in the driver's seat for this conflict. So the winner chicken dinner in all of it is this fucking guy. So where does that leave us? Well, the White House is telling us that the war is ahead of schedule, that WTI futures are pricing a return to the 60s by fall. The economy is fundamentally sound, so don't panic. But the actual CME futures tell you that WTI don't touch the 60s anywhere on the curve this year. The December 2026 contract is nearly $78 a barrel. The entire curve, month by month, through 2027, remains elevated in the 70s and beyond. And one of the world's top oil analysts is telling us that the paper market is entirely disconnected from the physical market, where prices are already far above what consumers and refiners were planning for. So the supply shock is already COVID scale. There are no spare barrels. There's no policy fix, and you can't print your way out of a physical supply chain break. So Hassett's claim is incredibly misleading. The market isn't agreeing with this 4 to 6 week timeline, and neither is physics. So having dismissed another administration lie, let's put this in context of some incredibly bad news that came out just this week. PPI, the producer price index, came in smoking hot this week, way above expectations and way above an already hot number from January. So in layman's terms, it basically tells us that this is already a trend. It's not an isolated thing. See, most people only pay attention to the CPI. That's the headline figure that gets regurgitated through the media. That's the headline inflation number. The figure that the Fed pays attention to is PCE, or core inflation. The precursor to both of those things is the PPI. And this week, the annual headline rate jumped from 2.9% to 3.4%. That's the highest in a year, and way above forecasts that it would hold flat. Now, core PPI, which strips out food and energy, came in at 3.9% year over year. Goods surged 1.1% in a single month. That's the steepest single month climb since August of 2023. It's astronomical. Now, keep in mind, this data is backward looking. It reflects prices in the economy before the Iran war and before oil blew past $100 a barrel. So we're looking at the worst PPI in a year, and it doesn't even include the energy price shock that's now ripping through the system in real time. Before the war escalated, before oil crossed $100 a barrel, before the Strait of Hormuz basically closed. So that means that March's data, which we won't see until mid-April, is going to reflect an economy where energy inputs spiked 40% in 2 weeks. Here's the thing about inflation. Inflation levels every field. It's the single most feared metric by every economist because there are no good ways to get it under control. It's like a virus to any economy. Doesn't matter how it's structured. You just have to let it pass and hope it doesn't kill you. I'm Max from UNFTR for the MeidasTouch. Remember to like this video and subscribe to the MeidasTouch to be notified of any new drops. You can find me at UNFTR on both Blue Sky and YouTube, and go to UNFTR.com to sign up for my free weekly newsletter. Thanks as always to the Meidas Mighty. I'll catch you in the next one.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.